So, welcome back to another chat with Corin. I'm here with a very, very, very special guest, my father in law, Mr. George,
What's up, Mr. C?
granddaddy. Goes by a lot of different names, but I have to tread lightly around this guy. So, we have a very interesting story. I'll tell you quick on how I met my father in law. I was dating Molly, and we were driving back from college, and I actually was driving her car, and I got into a pretty nice fender bender, and I was very nervous because I was driving her car, and I had never met her parents before, and we had to call her parents because we were right at the exit of where she lived, and all I kept hearing was that her father was like this big black guy, and I was a little nervous. But we called him. He came to the exit where we got into the crash, and he couldn't have been more nice. He was the nicest guy, friendliest. He was, we'll take care of this as long as you guys are healthy and no one's injured. So that was the first time I ever met my father-in-law, George. Very opinionated. Also one of the brightest guys I know. Religiously, spiritually, sports, cars, anything you need to know, he knows it all. So I wanted to chat with him a little bit because a lot of different things. The first thing I want to jump into is just Molly, because Molly has her own little playlist within Corin's world called Molly's Mind. And you've known her whole life. I've known her for probably about 11 years. Molly is very opinionated. She's very strong-minded, and that's something that I was just curious on her upbringing and values that you wanted to instill in her to make her such a strong-minded woman or something like that. So if you could just talk a little bit about your thoughts, because we're raising a daughter now, on raising Molly to be the independent, strong-minded person she is today.
Well, quite simply, I grew up around very powerful, very strong women. My mother and father had the same, Molly's grandparents, my father and my mother, they had the same careers. They were both RNs. My dad did all the cooking. He taught me how to cook. So our gender roles weren't as defined as they normally are. And it was always important to me that my daughters go out and they be heard. Not just be heard, but they can compete. And that the fact that they were women didn't mean anything. All three of my girls, Molly included, are all black belts. They were competitive black belts. Molly has a world championship, which she won in 2009.
Yeah.
So if Corin ever gets out of line, there could be a little hell to pay.
We have scrapped before, and there are YouTube videos of Molly roughing some people up.
So. Molly's roughed a few people up. And so yeah, I believe, I've always believed in equality, always fought for it. When I was coming up, I marched for equal rights for everybody, for women, men. I was lucky enough to serve for 11 years when I was in the car business as the liaison from NAMAD, which is the National Association of Minority Auto Dealers, to Jesse Jackson's Push International Trade Bureau. And quite simply, what we did was we fought for, equal opportunities for men, for women, and businesses of color, for the same types of financing and those type of things, so that we could compete out there. So, so I think Molly picked up a lot on that sense of, she can go out there and do anything anyone else can do. If you can do it, if someone else is doing it, you can do it. It's simple as that. There's really not a whole lot much more to say.
So do you think there's been a shift in, women's empowerment and women sort of being in more positions of power now and taking more charge in the household and bills or whatnot than what you've seen, maybe when you were younger, and stuff you were fighting for back then that might not have been happening that you see happening now? Like, what's the trend look like?
Well, yes. So outside of our household, as I mentioned earlier, my mother and father had the same job. They both worked full time as nurses. But when I would be it friends' homes or see other people. The mother would stay home.
Mm-hmm.
She did the cooking, and the dad was working. But as the economies have changed, and as many of our jobs, we've lost so many manufacturing jobs, and the middle class has been affected all throughout America. And as those jobs have gone overseas, those jobs are in place. I had a front row seat to that in the car business.
Mm-hmm.
I watched as manufacturing jobs for parts and other suppliers left and went to overseas, Mexico, Asia. And as that happened, what happened? Women then here had to take a much more active role in bringing income into the house, and so that's a pretty short synopsis of, I think, to answer your question as to how we got here. So yes, very rarely, I don't think you see families such as yours, Corin, where both you and Molly work.
Yeah.
And you guys.
Or if a woman now, what I've seen is if a woman gets pregnant, she'll have the baby, and a lot of the times they don't go back to work, because it's the women's job, I guess, to take care of the children and to stay home and provide for them, and they can't focus on their work anymore. I've known people that have gone back to work, and their work has taken stuff off of their plate because maybe they've missed time. So whether that's right or wrong, it's the wrong mentality.
Well, I think you're right, but I think that always comes down to what the economics of the individual situation is. I mean, if you can't afford your mortgage, she's got to go back to work.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you got a nice little home and you live in the suburbs with a picket fence and you got two cars, you got two car payments, you got a house payment, you've got all the other things you want to do. Regardless of how that played out, many times she may want to stay home, but she has to go back to work.
Yep.
So a lot of times that isn't an option.
Yeah.
So I mean, well, you know what, Molly, you and Molly just had my little granddaughter Nix.
Yep.
But could you survive with your lifestyle? I'm just asking a question.
No.
Could you survive with your lifestyle if Molly didn't go back to work?
No, absolutely not. And it's tough, and we have 2 dogs, and you want to do childcare, and all this stuff adds up, and I saw something on Twitter that was pretty interesting. There was a CEO of a banking company. It might have been Chase, and he's like a billionaire, but he was on trial or being questioned by someone on the Senate, and she sort of broke down what a bank teller's wage was. So they showed her base income of whatever, $35,000 or something. She started breaking down all the things that you don't realize, like basic needs of rent, food, and ultimately it came out that she was in the hole for negative $475, and this was before she even said, if she wants to go buy a T-shirt or something for her daughter. So the amount of bills is just it's tough for one person to be working in a household.
Well, I saw that same.
Yeah.
I saw it, and you hear people today say when they talk about a living wage, you hear people say, well, those are starter jobs. Well, all of a sudden, they've all become starter jobs because all the meat and potatoes jobs that people could build a family around are no longer here. When I moved from Brooklyn, New York to Rochester, New York in 1980, Eastman Kodak employed just under 60,000 people in Rochester.
Yeah, I was just talking about that.
Now they employ something, I think it's maybe a little north of 3,000 people worldwide.
Yeah.
And so all those jobs that were here in Rochester are gone. They had a bonus that their employees got every year. So what's that been replaced by? We've had tremendous growth in the sector of things like Lowe's and Home Depot and Wegmans, which is our grocery store here, Walmart. None of those businesses were here back in 1980, but they're all here now.
Yeah.
Restaurants. So these are all the jobs that people have replaced $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year jobs with basically $10 to $15 an hour jobs, and they can't raise a family or have a mortgage on those type of salaries. So yeah, I've seen it change.
Yeah.
And in the automobile industry, we've seen it change. I saw it change completely, where people who were coming in who could afford a car just a few years ago, they come in now and they can't afford the same car they were driving. So yeah, I mean, there's been a change.
Yeah, I mean, and definitely to your point, I was talking to my father today about Rochester and places I'm sure in Michigan and Detroit and stuff like that, who once were so booming in the car industry, and it was like the place to be, where salaries were probably high and people were probably making tons of money and going out, and that affects the whole city, because money's moving and people are buying things. But now it's sad. You look at a place like Rochester and it's run down. There's more crime. You know, now it's hopefully back up on the upswing a little bit because young kids are moving out there and living there. But outside of that, I want to back it up a little bit, because something that I've always been interested in you is, you're very strong-minded. You're very big on positive vibes and very grounded. So I was always just curious, like, who were some people, and I know some of these people already, but growing up, who were people that influenced you, that you looked to? I know you talk about Bruce Lee and Malcolm X, but who and why were these people influential to you into becoming the person that you are today?
Well, I've always been, outside of people in your own family. My dad was a very strong individual, as is my mother. So I grew up with two very, very strong parents. But I was. You brought up two people that influenced me. I grew up loving Bruce Lee and Malcolm X. I was reading Malcolm, when I was in grade school, and I just had a great appreciation for anybody who stood up for themselves, and I still do. And when you stand up, there's always a price to pay. And and so I watch people like Malcolm, and of course Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers. We can go on and on. Huey Newton, Fred Hampton. They all paid the price. Yeah. They all pay the ultimate price. To stand up. But the truth is that we stand on the shoulders of those people, and that goes all the way back. So for people that are black and brown, we stand on the shoulders of people that fought, for equality, to have an equal say, to be able to do the same things that everybody else does, and to be able to get a piece of the promise of America, right?
Yep.
And I think that same goes for everybody. I think that's all anyone wants. But those are the people that always, just had a huge influence on me, is people that stood up.
So something that's interesting to me, and I'm curious to hear your take on it, is I never lived through that era. I never experienced it. I'm obviously not black. I don't know what it's like to be a black male. Or I could advocate for those causes and live my life in a way that I would want my daughter to live the same life of everybody's equal. And we idolize these people like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X now. But when a situation like Colin Kaepernick happens, and people on either the left or the right, from my experiences, more people on the right, like a Fox News or something like that, criticize him and throw dirt on his name and sort of like put bad saying on what he's doing. It almost makes me think that all this glamorizing they do for Martin Luther King and Malcolm X is all bullshit, because if I have a feeling if Martin was still alive today, they wouldn't be talking about him the same way they do that he's not here. When you've got a guy like Colin Kaepernick who's more or less doing the same type of thing, putting himself out there, and they speak poorly about his cause, how can they how can they celebrate someone like Martin and then not do the same for Colin Kaepernick?
So, in the interest of understanding the type of show we have here and not getting too deep into it, I truly believe that all the answers lie in history. And I think that as ordinary human beings, sometimes we are invested in our lives today, and we're ignorant of history and how we got here. So to answer your question about Colin Kaepernick, you actually have to understand, how the Civil War started. You have to understand something, and I would implore you, read about the Dred Scott decision.
Uh-huh.
Dred Scott decision for for people of color in the United States is probably the most important decision ever. So Dred Scott was a slave.
Mm-hmm.
He sued for his slavery. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court of Roger Taney, who was the Chief Justice at that time, sued that he could not be free, that he was a slave and he was property, right? So that decision is one of the things that helped lead to the Civil War and overturning that, and we had
Brown versus Board of Education.
No. Brown versus Board of Education was much later.
Oh, okay.
But you have to start someplace. So you had to start there, and even after, slavery and the 13th and 14th Amendment to the Constitution outlawing slavery and involuntary servitude, now you got into things like Ken Burns, the filmmaker, did an unbelievable take on what happened after. It was called Slavery by Another Name, where people were basically taken off the streets for like minor infractions, traffic violations.
I mean, that still happens today.
Yeah, but they were literally still working. They were taken in the South. They were working plantations and working it. So so it's always been a fight for freedom, and then it was educational freedom, right? And then you had the rise of the Klan, and with the stated goal of making sure that black people didn't advance. You had places like Black Wall Street, thriving black communities, which were raided and people were killed. Thousands of people were killed because they didn't want to see the rise of any type of sub-civilization underneath that. We were all black people were always meant to be subservient. So you kind of have to understand that. And so the question, to answer your question about someone like Kaepernick, that if we just juxtapose and bring that up to today, why is that a big deal with Kaepernick, or why is that happening? And the only thing that I can think of, I don't know why people want to do that, but to me it's fear, right? So it's fear that that people are going to be more competitive, and maybe they'll take your job or something like that. Yeah. But as a black person growing up, I can tell you this. My father schooled me on what to do when I got pulled over.
Yeah.
On how to keep my hands visible. And I'm talking about, I got my driver's license when I was 16, so we're going back to 1972. Yeah.
It was more prevalent.
So it was still the same, right? It's not something that only happened today. I know that when my sons were coming up, I schooled them on the same thing. Yeah. On how to get pulled over and to be, so So my point is on Kaepernick. Is this stuff happening? Well, that's what his protest was about. And protest is as American as apple pie. Hell, the Boston Tea Party was a protest. Yeah. Right? So it's how America was formed when we protest, and now all of a sudden protesting is somehow un-American. It's not. It's without protest, the civil rights movement never would have come to fruition. Women's suffrage,
gay marriage
movement was based on protest. And today you have things like gay marriage, and you should be able to marry who you love. Yeah. Why is the government involved in that, or anybody involved in that, right? It's none of my business.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, I didn't mean to get too substantive in it.
That's okay.
But right. I know you have strong-minded opinions, and I always respect your opinion because.
We might not cover all of this one. But I have to do more than one.
No, yeah, you're always welcome on, and you're gonna have a lot of hot takes on everything. And like I said, I respect your opinion on a lot of things. And one thing that I also. And we're gonna get into some more lighter topics too, but one thing
I know what you want to talk about.
But I want to make it at least interesting and give people a little backstory on who you are.
Backstory,
something that's passionate to you is Buddhism. And that's something that you've sort of swayed me on, and sort of I've looked into it. I've chanted with Molly. I think it's interesting. I like the relaxation of it. I like the positivity of it, the calmness. I find myself in a lot of times when I don't feel like I get angry a lot, but if I ever start to feel anxious or nervous, I just, calm myself and sort of just look at the bigger picture that, ultimately everything will be okay. I'm just curious how you got involved with it and how you sort of came to understanding that this is something that's for you.
So I was introduced to Buddhism in 1975, the year after I graduated high school, by my best friend. He introduced me to it, and I grew up Christian. I grew up in Episcopal. My parents were very devout Episcopals. But just being honest, it never fit me. It never made, I never really, believed like in the concepts. And when I would ask a lot of questions, I'm a question asker.
Yeah.
When I would ask questions, when I went to Episcopal school and we had Sunday school every Sunday, I was an altar boy for many years. And when I would ask questions, priests would normally say to me, just pray, just pray, just pray. Well, I needed to know more. And when I was introduced to Buddhism in 1975, I remember walking out of my first meeting, and I don't know what to say other than I understood at that time who I was. I knew in that moment that's who I was, and that was where my spiritual calling was, and nothing has ever assuaged that in last 44 years.
Yeah.
I still see my life the same. And Buddhism is basically, it's very simple. It's simple and complicated all at the same time, but it's really about understanding yourself. It's understanding, and we believe that everything comes from within. We know the answers, but it's hard for people sometimes to to do or say the right thing. You don't need anyone outside of you, a parent or anything. You don't have to go to church to know that if I go into a store and if I want that case, if I pick it up and take it, I know that's wrong, right? And it's the same thing with other things in our lives. And so you have to basically make these decisions, and Buddhism is helping you to make the right decision in your life. And they're not always all that simple or cut and dry. And it's also understanding that we in Buddhism we believe in a cause and effect world. So everything we do is a cause.
Well, the biggest thing, not to cut you off,
No,
but
it's fine.
people always say, "Oh, that's karma." That's karma. That happened, and he tripped on the sidewalk because he was yelling at the old lady down the street. You know, so whether or not people think anything about Buddhism, I'm sure you've said the word karma before in your life, and that comes from Buddhism, right?
Yeah, right. Karma. Well, yeah, we believe deeply in karma. So karma is real.
Okay.
But karma is not bad. People think, oh, well, something bad happened and that's karma.
Oh, okay.
Karma is neither good nor bad, right? So karma is something that we create from our own karmic tendencies. All right, I'll explain that really quickly.
Yeah.
If I hang around a bunch of bad people, maybe I didn't do anything bad, but just by hanging about them, I am creating karmic tendencies that can lead to something bad, right? So, again, that's pretty simple, but this life is always about making the right decisions, and the truth is, many times making the right decision is not easy.
Yeah, 100%.
So, sometimes, and usually, I always told my kids when they were growing up that the hard decision is usually the right decision.
Yep.
And so, Buddhism is about leading your life to that, understanding that our lives are a culmination of what we call the three existences of the past, the present, and the future. So you learn from the past, so you live your life in this moment, which is the only thing you have control over for a better future, right?
Yep.
But the future's always coming, so if you're not doing right here, this isn't going to come here. And the interesting thing about karma, it doesn't always necessarily affect you. Some people, we might die and pass on, but if you leave that bad karma, it could affect your family, right?
Yeah,
so take like an easy example. If you're a serial killer, right?
I've heard.
So if you're like a serial killer and you someone like Ted Bundy, right? He's been executed, but my goodness, how do you think his family's doing?
The name
these
lives
days?
on. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He created karma that will affect his family for who knows how many generations, right? And that's just one example. It's one of the things that are very important to think about. So karma is something you can create. Now, on the good side, right? As I said, karma is neither good or bad; it simply exists. If you make good causes, and if you live a life where you're doing, and a good cause is simply the best you can. If you've given whatever it is, work, home, family, if you've given
Charity
it your whatever, if you've given it your best effort, those causes create good karma. And you don't know where it's going to come from. It's what opens doors.
Yeah.
Taking those steps sometimes, oh man, I heard you did this or that. And so those steps open up doors, and that's good karma. So there is good and bad karma.
Yeah.
But it just depends on how you're living in the moment.
I think just hearing that almost makes me think why, when you went to that Buddhism meeting, you connected with it so strong, because a lot of the people that influenced you had to make maybe the tough decision or the not right decision at the time.
Right.
And, in a way you connected with that, which is similar to Buddhism, and that's just a perfect match right there.
If you want an explanation of Buddhism and how it's affected someone's life, for anybody who knows about Herbie Hancock, the jazz musician, I think he just turned 79. Herbie's a Buddhist, and he gave a series of lectures at Harvard University a few years ago, and you can find him on YouTube. It's at the Mahindra Institute, and if you just put in Herbie Hancock Buddhism, Harvard University, it'll come up, and it could explain it a whole lot better than I. It's a series of 4 or 5 lectures. There's one in particular that's all about Buddhism, and he talks about how it's affected his music, right, and the causes that he's made in his life, and it's it's a practice that helps you every day. It helps keep you calm, because we understand that death is a part of life, and so we're never going to be here forever. And so once you kind of understand that, it's very hard to get rattled about the daily things, the daily challenges we have. Right? We all got to face daily challenges, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen that a lot in TV shows I've watched. Like, people will be in the grocery store and a guy will come in with a gun or something, and these people, this one in particular guy I'm thinking of, I think it was in it was in the Ozarks, and he was a priest, and his wife had passed away, and he sort of just came to the acceptance of, death happens, and the guy comes in with the gun and, is pointing it at the guy, and he's just like, do what you're gonna do. And it almost made the robber with the gun not want to kill him, because he just saw that this guy was just open to whatever the next step was. So,
well, I get that.
I don't know. That could have been a bad analogy.
No, it's not. It's not. It was a very good analogy. But I just want to point out that there's many different ways to go.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
So in August, and I think you know this, right? Back in September, I drive Uber. Sometimes I'm not right now, but and I think I told you this story. But I was carjacked, and the carjacker did get into the car with me. He didn't have a weapon that I can see, and a fight ensued. Now, when he first got in the car, I was really afraid. I thought, man, is this the way it's going to end? I'm never going to see my family, my kids again. And I'm thinking, and he's right there, and we're going at it. And but that calm you're talking about came over me, and the calm was, well, maybe it's my time. But I didn't think do what you want. My thought was, if I'm going, you're coming with me. That was my thought.
Yep.
And so I was lucky enough to be able to put him in a position to break his hand. I broke his wrist, and I was able to get him out of my car, and we survived. But that feeling of that calmness, I understood it from a completely different perspective, right?
Yeah.
And enlightenment is happiness, and in that moment, I actually felt happy that I understood that, even though this was it, I was going to go on my terms. Yeah. Right. So it helps you in ways that I can't. We couldn't explain in 45 minutes.
Yeah. No,
but it's an amazing practice.
Yeah, and to transition into something a little bit lighter, which now I want to get into. Something on the topic of athletes.
All right, here we go. This is what he wanted. This is what he really wanted.
This is what I really wanted. I sort of threw a curveball. He didn't know all this stuff was coming, so I give him. So he might tell me at the end, I don't want to use any of it.
No, we're good. You can use it all.
But so that calming that you talk about, this is something that I feel, and George is very vocal on Facebook, and he's got his trolls out there that may have some bad karma coming their way, but hopefully not. I'm just kidding.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
But I think that calming is something that some of the greatest athletes sort of maybe experience that in their highest levels of NBA Finals or Tom Brady in a Super Bowl, where at the moment you expect someone to, this guy breaks into your car, he's expecting you to freak out and, hey, take whatever you want. But the fact that, like, you and these, top tier athletes can sort of step away from that situation and look at it like, hey, this is what's happening. I'm in control of it, and sort of just own that moment is incredible, And something I've seen in athletes, and I see it in some, whether they've won a championship or not. I look at some athletes like, I'm a huge Knicks fan. I loved Allen Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Allen Houston.
I loved him too.
He never won a championship.
Right.
But he just had this calming demeanor that when he was in a game, whether there's playoffs or a regular season game, he's going to hit the shot.
By the way, I'm a huge Knicks fan.
Yeah.
And I'm an older Knicks fan. I go back to when we won a couple championships.
I didn't see any of those chips.
So when he was interested in my daughter, he scored some points there. Because I'm a huge Knicks fan.
Yeah. So, Knicks they run heavy in our family. But Allen Houston is an example, and I can't think of maybe someone who's won a championship that has a little bit more pedigree. But he just had that calming demeanor. Something I see in LeBron, I don't think he has that calming demeanor. I don't think when he's in a moment of, to pursue some excellence, that he can step outside of that situation and really take charge. He's phenomenal. I think he has pure, great athlete abilities. But the fact that people put him as the greatest athlete of all time brings me to my question to you, which is something we agree on, but I'll play devil's advocate a little bit.
Okay.
Because a lot of my audience is younger, so everyone's probably going to put MJ.
You got it.
This guy's wrong, MJ. Who's your greatest of all time? And then follow that up with why he's the greatest of all time.
That's real simple. The greatest basketball player of all time was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Very simple to me. And it's not even close. And you can go down the stats and so I'm on a 6'4". I'm on a 6. My next birthday will make me 62. So I've seen these guys play. I was in grade school when Kareem was at Power Memorial coming up. So, for total transparency, maybe I am a little biased because I saw him play as a schoolboy.
He's a New York City kid, right?
He's a New York City kid. I grew up in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a school called Rhodes, and he went to Power, right? So we played in what was called the PSAL, which at that time was the private school athletic league, right? Mm-hmm. And so I saw him play, and he was such a phenom. We'd all go and see him play. And he graduated, I think like maybe 3 or 4 years before me, but I followed his career because, he was not just larger than life. Heck, at that time, even when he was in high school, he was 6'10", 6'11", right?
Yeah.
So, my belief for that is very simple. When you look at his career, if he won more games as a high school ball player than anyone. He won more college games. He's got 3 college championships, and he was most outstanding player, all 3 years that he played. And he won 3 titles. Now let's look at what happened in the NBA. When he came to the NBA, he broke every record. He was Rookie of the Year with Milwaukee. He won a championship with Milwaukee his second year. Yeah. And it was the team was only in existence for 6 years, right? Yeah. And he took that team with an aging Oscar Robertson.
Yeah, people will try and use that Oscar Robertson card.
Oscar was aging at that time.
Yeah,
and he won and he won a championship, and he went to the Lakers, and he won 5 more. So Kareem has 6 titles. He's got 6 MVPs, right? So everyone says, the other guy's he's got 5 MVPs. Well, Kareem's got 6. Kareem's got 6 titles. Among all of his others, rebounds, block shots. You guys can look them
A
all
move
up.
that has been never duplicated
He's got
by anybody else.
We're coming to that.
Oh, okay.
And any score. People. I get. One friend of mine's like, well, he didn't shoot the three. No, but he shot the sky hook.
Yeah.
And no one else shoots the sky. Now you see a lot of guys shoot the baby hook. No one comes completely over the top. It's never been duplicated by a big man, small man. No one. If they throw it up and it goes in, it's luck. Kareem did it, for 30 points a game. It can't be defended from a guy that's 7'2".
Yep.
He was tough as nails on the court. Didn't take anything. Don't ever forget he broke Kent Benson's nose. Yeah, remember the punch?
I don't remember.
A lot of people don't know. Look that one up.
Okay.
Look that one up. Look up the Kent Benson was giving Kareem
So
the elbow.
that's where I'm going to jump in, because something that a lot of people who watch this right now will say,
how tough Michael is, right?
Well, no, I never saw him punch him in the face, or I never saw him win those
you
championships. I know,
yeah.
But I'm saying that was an argument that you made was something with Jordan.
So here's the deal, right? I think all the stats in his career speak for itself. 19-time All-Star, 20 all-time scoring record, 38,387 points. Nobody's gotten it. A lot of guys have gotten close, but nobody's gotten it. And here's the thing about Michael Jordan. I respect Jordan's career. Don't get me wrong. Everybody thinks that I hate Jordan, right? There's a couple things I don't like about Jordan, but, there's things I don't like about certain athletes. Mm-hmm. But Michael Jordan, and again, I'm on the 6th floor. So I was around when, and for guys up here with me, guys that are 50, even maybe late 40s, 50s, 60s, we remember when we were watching TV at night, the news would come on, they would have the weather, then they would have the sports. Mm-hmm. The sports had one clip of what you wanted to see. And if it was a great play, you'd turn the channel real quick to see if it hadn't come on ABC yet, right? Mm-hmm. Michael Jordan was the first superstar of the ESPN 24/7 era where the shots were played over and over and over again.
The tongue out.
Right. And so it just got ingrained in these folks that he was the absolute best. Uh-huh. And I remember, many times, not one or two times, saying to people when they were talking about, Michael's the best, he's got 6 championships. And I was like, well, Bill Russell's got 11. Mm-hmm. And the people would either say something like, Bill Russell's got 11, or I have to check that out. No, Bill Russell's got 11. Mm-hmm. So is that just, the simple measure of that. So, if you saw Kareem play, and if you look at what his what his record is and what his record entails, and I've heard all the stuff. Well, Kareem's 7'2", he played a different position. He played basketball.
Yeah.
They all put on short pants and played basketball.
Yeah.
He is simply the best basketball player I've ever seen. His stats bear out that, he's the best that's ever played from cradle to grave. Mm-hmm. So from high school, college,
when they go into the Basketball Hall of Fame, they look at their whole resume.
It's their whole resume.
People like to just talk about just the NBA.
Right.
But, there's that famous story about Michael Jordan. He got cut from his high school team.
Right.
That should go on his resume.
Well, hey, and even if you set high school aside, Michael got 1 title with Dean Smith. Uh-huh. Kareem got 3.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And someone said, he had Wooden. Well, dude, Michael had Dean Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, so you can't, Michael got 1, he got 3.
Yeah. Well, people just dismiss. You don't even really hear Kareem's name in this discussion that much, which is like, it's a little disturbing because the guy, it's sort of like when they put up the all-time points list, they sort of just say his name like it's an afterthought.
It is an afterthought. But the truth is,
but I think he also, and whether right or wrong, he's very passive. He doesn't boast about his stats, which is.
Here's the deal, right? Russell, Robertson, even the logo, Jerry West. Those guys are all afterthoughts.
Yeah. Because
they didn't play in the 24/7 ESPN. I was telling you earlier when they were talking about high flyers. Mm-hmm. David Thompson. Cocaine derailed his career. But if David Thompson was playing in the, he was probably, I think, maybe 6'4", 6'3", 6'4". If David Thompson was playing in the ESPN era, this guy was throwing down dunks that were just crazy.
Really?
You know,
Okay.
I mean, but no one. Again, he didn't play in that era,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And he played. I think he played in Denver, if memory serves me
Mm-hmm.
correct. But there were great players that didn't play in that era. I mean, George Gervin, the Iceman.
Dr. J. Yeah.
Dr. J. I mean,
Darryl Dawkins
Darryl
was on the
Dawkins,
fly, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Chocolate Thunder. You know, all these guys were incredible. Moses Malone. You know, when everyone talks about, I always hear, the greatest big man. Many people think is Hakeem. Don't get me wrong, Hakeem's great, but Moses was his teacher.
Yeah, he laid the groundwork.
Even when Hakeem was in college, it was Moses, because Moses finished his career in Houston, who was tutoring Hakeem right from the beginning. And all those moves, they're all classic Moses Malone moves. Now,
the Hakeem shake.
Those guys got as they, as the years went by, nutrition got better, and he was probably quicker than Moses, but that's where it all began. Moses Malone had a stellar career. I'm not saying he was better than Hakeem, but what I am saying is what you're saying is those guys are all an afterthought, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those were the building blocks of the NBA. Those you have to acknowledge
the greats.
those guys. And when you have someone like Kareem, whose most of his records still stand until today, how could he not be in the conversation?
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I've always agreed on you with this. And like, right or wrong, I looked, when I was younger, before I knew you, I would assume, Jordan was the greatest, because I didn't do my research.
Right.
But, you opened my eyes up to, Kareem, and I started looking into his stats and, reading up on him a little bit more than just the basic knowledge that I knew of, watching Jordan and seeing him, win. I mean, what he did was amazing. 6 championships, 6 for 6.
It was.
But there's other people that have played the game.
And let me be clear. I'll say that Kareem is my GOAT, right? And he's not just mine. Dr. J. Gary Payton. I mean, there's quite a few people, ex-players that saw Kareem as the greatest of all time. But whenever you talk about someone who's the greatest of all time, the word arguably always comes into it. Let me also just say one other thing about Kareem, because we talked a little bit earlier about social justice and what goes on. I think to become the GOAT, and that was first coined that I can remember from Muhammad Ali. I don't remember anyone being a GOAT before Muhammad.
Yeah.
But when Muhammad, they were calling him the GOAT, it wasn't just for his boxing prowess. Now, I got some friends out there, they say, it's just only what they did on the court or on the field or in the ring. I don't think...
What's your take on that? Does an athlete have to just be an athlete, or can they step outside of their realm and share their voice on what they believe?
So my take on it is very simple. My take is the first guy, and again, this is a guy I grew up with. Matter of fact, in 1975, when I was working for the YMCA of Greater New York, we took a trip to Muhammad's camp in Pennsylvania, and I saw him spar. Oh, listen. I know you love sports.
Yeah.
This was the best.
Oh, I'm sure.
We're right at the apron, right? And he was sparring with Jimmy Young. And literally, I mean, they were wearing headgear, but you could hear the blows. They were like thunder, And they were hitting so hard, the sweat was flying off of them and hitting us, And I'm thinking to myself, I'm never washing that arm again. It was unbelievable. The speed at which they move and the grace for men that size was just incredible.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that Muhammad, I could be a little biased on this, and that's the point I want to make. But Muhammad was talked about as the GOAT because of what a stand-up guy he was, right? He stood up for his name when there were many people, unfortunately even including Jackie Robinson, who refused to call him Muhammad Ali.
Oh, really?
I know that. Even Frazier always called him Clay.
Okay.
And so Muhammad was became revered as the GOAT, not just because of the fact that he was that great an athlete, but he became an amazingly engaging interview.
Interview.
And an activist. And it didn't matter, who. There's a film out there on YouTube where some college kids were harassing him because he said, the reason he didn't go to Vietnam on religious reasons. He said, I don't have an argument with those people. I'm not going to go and shoot them.
Yeah.
And, Muhammad stood up to those guys and just simply said to them, hey, you know what? We have enough problems here at home. He goes, my folks are getting killed here at home. Yeah. And so he became a hero, not just to us, but I mean people in white communities, like everybody loved Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
And so GOAT, to me, encompassed so much more than just what he did in the ring. And so I kind of feel that way about other athletes too. And so when you look at people like Jackie Robinson, same thing. Even though he was not maybe the GOAT, but Jackie did so much outside of the ring for social justice. And I saw the same thing in Kareem. I mean, Kareem's written like 40 books.
Yeah.
He's written novels. He's written child's books. He's written, books on civil rights. I mean, And
that's something you might have not seen with Jordan when you felt he might have had an opportunity to do stuff like that for his community.
You want to get right to it? Absolutely not. I never saw that with Jordan.
I
saw Jordan go the opposite direction, right? That when he was asked for a quote on that, I felt like Michael was always more. I felt like it was more important to him to protect the money and the stream of income that he had from the various sponsors, as opposed to saying what protecting the people who were being hurt.
Yeah, no, I mean I agree. I agree with you. But I think that's where debate comes into play because
there's debatable.
Yeah, some people will think an athlete's separate from taking a stand in his community. I think if you're a celebrity and you have that big of a following, I think there comes an obligation that you have to take a stand for something.
So I started out by saying that history matters.
Yeah.
Right. So if history matters, then read about Jack Johnson, who was boxing in the 1900s. People should read about Jesse Owens. During the time of the Nazis, right? People should read about John Carlos and Tommy Smith at the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City. I mean, these were all athletes. There's the iconic picture with them standing up as people were being beat to shreds in Watts and New York City and Detroit and other cities, right? So to get to the reason I bring them up is because to get to 2019 and people say or someone says that nameless face air quote person that sports and politics should be separate. They've never been separate, right? Yeah. It's always been when someone becomes famous, their fame becomes a platform or a bully pulpit, if you will. For them to either push for right or in some cases wrong, but mostly for right. There's a lot of people that were activists and stood on that. In the music industry, a lot of the Motown people, Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye, these are all people who stood for what was right. To this day, he's in his 90s now. Harry Belafonte is still an activist. So, I mean, to somehow think that actors or entertainers or something should just stick to that, that's a new, that's just a new kind of thing that's being thrown out there because these people do have some influence because of their achievements.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And one more thing I'm curious your thoughts on. How do you separate, so I'm a big backer of Ray Rice. I think what he did was terrible. I know him personally. We went to the same high school, and he's done a lot of great for the community. He had one bad night that transpired. How do you separate what someone did on the field from an action that happens to them, similar to like Kareem Hunt or on a bigger scale, O.J. Simpson? Can you still recognize someone for what they did on the field when they did such a bad act off the field?
Okay, I know this is not going to be popular, but one of the things that I grew up with and heard all the time is that America is a country of forgiveness, right? And we're gonna forgive. And I've seen many times that it happened. I mean, let's remember Marv Albert, right?
Yeah.
Who
he
did
dressed
time?
up in
He
his-
dressed up wearing a thing, and I guess he whacked his girlfriend. But I mean, he finished out his career, back announcing, calling Knick games like if nothing had happened, right? And all I'm saying is that, I got into this conversation the other day with someone with respect to Michael Vick. And he was saying, well, Vick should never, ever have, be able to do anything ever again, because I guess he was trying to just sign as an announcer someplace.
He was trying to, I think, sign up for the AFL or one of his leagues.
And he says, he should never do anything ever again. The guy went to jail. Look, he went to jail. He paid his price. If you're asking me, he should be able to get it. If he's paid his price, he should be able to get a job. And I'll tell you this, too, and I don't want to get into Michael Vick, but not only did he do that, but he did everything that the court asked of him and more, right? He's become a huge advocate against dog fighting, and he's taken care of animals. He's donated a lot of money to it. And if someone, and I said, I know this is going to be unpopular, but I just think if you've paid your price, is it a lifetime? I'll ask you, should it be a lifetime sentence? I don't think so.
Yeah, but I guess some people draw the line on what is paying the price. Like a Kareem Hunt, who hit this girl and kicked her while she was down on video, whatever happened. He already re-signed with the team. Now it's within the rights of the NFL to sign him, but some people feel that maybe he wasn't signed, he was signed too quickly. So it's like people's opinions of things rather than the justice system,
Well, you and I both know that, with Ray Rice, a lot of people felt like he was the end of his career.
Yeah.
Kareem Hunt is not. So, I mean, there's always, when his money's at stake, there's always going to be, a justification. But sometimes I still felt like Cap could play.
Yeah.
And he never got, he never got another opportunity.
Yeah.
And, and let's face it, now that was strictly politics.
Yeah.
Right? That he, whether it doesn't matter what side you're on.
Yeah.
That's the fact that he never got another job was strictly politics, right?
Yeah.
He was banned for his beliefs.
Yeah. I think there's certain storylines that get fed to us that people eat up and they, live in that moment, and something that we could sort of wrap up on is, like Tiger Woods winning.
Okay.
So, we've always I compared Tiger Woods to like the Truman Show. We've seen every aspect of his life.
And we sure have.
In a way, I guess it's sort of cool and it's sort of interesting to see, highs and lows and like these, fairy tale ending stories of, something bad happened and something good happened. Tiger's interesting because he, in a sense, he brought this upon himself originally with the whole cheating on his wife, and, I can't blame him. He's always been in the spotlight, so like everything he does gets magnified. But the fact that he won the Masters, to me, at his age, after all that he's been through, was truly impressive. And
yes, I agree. So that's how this conversation all got started, by the way.
Yeah.
And how we ended up doing this, from my nephew's house. So Corin said, let's just do it now. Because I asked him what he thought of Tiger's win.
Yeah.
And a few days ago, after Tiger won the Masters, I posted just simply a picture of Tiger and Tiger's name with an exclamation mark, Tiger. Which I was very happy that he won, but it wasn't meant to be political.
Yeah.
It was meant to just say, hey, he hadn't really won. He's won one tournament last year. He won the Tour Championship, and he played better last year. But winning a major is a huge deal, and having not won it since he won on that broken leg, 10 years ago, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
I was just simply acknowledging the athletic achievement of coming back and winning, one of the largest tournaments in golf. And I had a lot of people come on and say, well, you don't like Michael, so, what about Tiger? And I'm going to answer that now on
We'll
camera,
end on this,
right?
yeah.
Those folks know who they are, right? And it was simply a congratulatory message to Tiger. I do not believe in whataboutism. I don't believe that if you're talking on one topic that, we come in and we say, well, what about this or what about that? If we want to talk about this other topic, that's a separate conversation. But when you what about a topic, and I have one friend in particular.
Or let me tell you what
you're saying.
Yeah.
He always says to me, "Oh, so what you're saying is, you know." And so if you're saying that, you know, when we talk about, whenever I mention Kareem, he always comes up with Emmitt Smith. So what you're saying is then, you know, Emmitt Smith has the most yards, so he's the greatest running back. Go, we're having a basketball conversation. Now you're having a football conversation.
Yeah.
I call that whataboutism.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's how this conversation got started. Because my son-in-law here, when I said that, he mentioned to me he'd seen the thread, and he says, "Yeah, well, what about Jordan?" I go, "Oh, wait a second, because Jordan's got nothing to do with that."
Yeah.
Tiger. Now, if we want to have a conversation on that particular topic of what Jordan's done off the field or hasn't done, what Tiger's done off the field or hasn't done, and what someone's feelings on it might have been, that's fine. But a congratulatory message or thinking that somebody did a good job, that's not it. And you know, and they love to say, my friends love to say that I hate Jordan. I don't hate Jordan. I just simply don't think he was good as Kareem. That doesn't mean hate.
Yep. No, I get that.
And so I don't think everything has to have a comparison attached to it. You just so you know, I'll say it on camera. I congratulate Tiger on winning. Now all the other stuff is another conversation which we can have.
Yeah. So we'll end that there. I think this was really interesting. George has tons and tons more to add. He's a phenomenal chef. He could throw down in the kitchen. His Caribbean food is second to none. So yeah, he will definitely have more to talk about. But anything else you wanna touch upon?
No. I mean,
You think that was all right?
That was great. I'm all about the cooking.
Yeah.
You know, so that's where I am at this point in my life, and you know, and my family. You know, my family, my son-in-law, my granddaughter, and you know, it's all about the family, man. So
that was cool. So that's my father-in-law, George. That's Molly's dad. So, you know, if you are going to write a negative comment to Molly, she's going to get back at you because she got it from this man. She's strong-minded, determined, and she'll tell you how it is. So thanks for watching.
But you know what? I know I've heard Molly and Corin say this. Say what you think.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whatever you feel or what do you think? You know, if you think I'm all wet, you don't, you know, whatever. You know, I mean,
no.
hey,
People will keep it real.
It's fair. Keep it real.
People
It's
will
fair.
keep it real.
Right?
Yeah.
You
Only
know?
in the right way of keeping it real. Like Molly said, if a video will just get posted and a negative comment will go on there without even watching and learning, then you're just trolling, and then you're just doing that because
those are worthy of ignorance, right? Those type of comments, right?
Yeah.
But decent comments where people have a real
gripe
point
with you
to make
about something
or something, that's fine. You know, I'm very capable of defending myself.
100%, yeah. So yeah, I mean, people will keep it real as they always do. So we appreciate you watching. If you made it this far, I'm always impressed. So thank you, and thank you to George.
Thank you.
See you later.
Peace.